Good evening, everyone. Welcome to yet another session of TIFFIN Talks with Kaveree Bamzai. Today we have the best-selling author and heartfulness expert Joshua Pollock with us, who's going to talk about spirituality, meditation, and his experience with none other than Rahman. And he'll be guided through this entire another 35-40-minute session with none other than Kaveree Bamzai. Over to you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Hello and welcome to yet another edition of TIFFIN Talks. Today, we're all about TIFFIN for the mind, body and soul. It's International Yoga Day. And we have Joshua Pollock with us today, who's many things. He's a heartfulness trainer, he's a yogi, he's a violinist, a long-time collaborator with Rahman. And most importantly, I think an ambassador of India, an American ambassador of India and India's tradition. So hello and welcome, Joshua. Thank you for joining us on Yoga Day. And, I can only ask, how and when did this journey begin of becoming India's true son?
Wow. The only thing I wanted in the very beginning was just, I was so entranced. I was so entranced. I found some books. I think I found a copy of Gita when I was 13. And a year later, I found a copy of Patanjali Yoga Sutras.
Okay.
And these books just
Where were you growing up, Joshua?
Also, I'm from the US, right?
No, and which part of it?
And I'm from the state of Maine, which is the most northeastern state.
Yeah.
It's a very rural area.
Right.
There's not much there.
Right.
And I had a very unusual upbringing, even for that area, because, we didn't have hot water, right? Hot running water.
Right.
We didn't have a toilet even. There was an outhouse, so it was very sort of rustic childhood that I had, because my parents, they moved up to this, they got something like 60 acres of land in the middle of the wilderness. Right? For some dirt cheap price, I think like $5,000 US, 60 acres, $5,000 in the 1970s. And it was just nothing. It was just a wood lot. And they said, let's build a house. They never built a house.
Farmers or were they hippies?
Something in between. Right? Yeah, so they were, and that's where I was born. So they lived in a teepee, these tents that Native Americans used to live in while they built the house. And they built it like that, and I was born there, and I grew up there, right? So it was very simple.
What's the biggest town near you?
Well, my town had about 200 people.
200, that's it.
I mean, to call it a town, I mean, it is technically a town.
Right. I mean, that's like a little apartment block in India.
Yeah, exactly. I think the closest city, let's say, is maybe 2 hours away, and that had about 40,000 people.
Wow.
So you can see.
So how did you come upon the Gita in this in the middle of nowhere?
See, behind me, you can see this very, very modest selection of books, this assortment of books, right?
Right.
But
I can see White Tiger there. I can see a good selection.
Oh, good. I'm glad you approve. Some of them belong to my wife. Some of them belong to me.
Right.
Anyway, this is nothing compared to the bookshelf in my house when I was a child that my parents had. It's just this bookshelf that went the whole wall, and then the next wall, and then upstairs. There was so much there. And there also wasn't much to do, as you can imagine, right, in this far-flung remote area.
Right.
So I read a lot, and sometimes I'd come across a real gem. And that's where I found these books, among others, that influenced me a lot. The influence was not immediate.
Right.
Immediately it impacted my mentality,
Right.
but it did not impact my action or influence my action until later, maybe 10, 15 years later, something like that.
But there was something propelling you towards India even then.
Yeah, that's true. That really is true.
And you trained to be a Western classical violinist? How did that happen?
Yes, that was my passion as a child. From the age of 4 years old, I was really demanding a violin, not asking or requesting it, demanding a violin from my parents.
Right.
And this kept going on and on and on until finally they were able to get one somewhere. And the next trick was to find a teacher in that area. So finally they found a teacher, they sorted out the violin, and I started lessons. And I was really just completely devoted to this. This was the one thing that I loved. And I practiced a lot. As a small child, I was 8 years old. I was practicing 4.5 hours a day. I remember every morning I would wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning and practice for 2 hours in school, and then practice another couple of hours at home. So this was a really serious thing for me. And there was no question that I would do anything apart from playing music, from playing Western classical music in my mind. Now, this is all in the past now. You know, I haven't really been playing for the last few years, and it's really crazy to me. It's like it's
another life.
As the 2 lifetimes just sort of, let's just condense them together like that. And
so at what point did you came to India though as a violinist?
Yes, I visited first.
Right.
I visited first in 2005.
Right.
But then I was hired by Rahman in 2008, right? And then I was living in London at the time. I was in school doing my master's degree in London.
Where in London?
Yeah, I was there for 2 years. I was there.
Where?
Well, I went to school at the Guildhall, which is in the Barbican.
Right.
I lived all over the city though.
Right.
Various apartments.
But studying at the Guildhall must have been marvelous.
Yeah. It absolutely was. I had an amazing teacher, violin teacher, and it was a wonderful experience. Now, by that time, I'd visited India a couple of times already, and I just really felt comfortable here. I still feel comfortable here. And I was thinking at that time, how can I continue what I do, being Western classical music, and is it possible for it to in some way take me there?
Right.
You know? And I didn't think it was possible.
Right.
And I had already, not to be too confusing, but I'd already been meditating now for about 6 years.
Okay.
All right.
On your own.
Even though I'd found this heartfulness meditation in America.
Okay.
Yeah. So for 6 years, I'd already been meditating. I'd already been teaching meditation for a couple of years, right? So I remember one day I traveled down from London to Plymouth in the UK, right?
Yeah.
And there I was scheduled to give some meditation sessions to some local people who were interested. And for whatever reason, nobody showed up that day.
Oh no.
So there I was sitting there, and the person who'd organized this was sitting there with me, and it was in some sort of cultural center.
Right.
You know, and there were these maps sitting around and various objects, educational materials. And I was discussing my wish to move to India with this friend of mine. Actually, I wasn't discussing it with them. We were just sort of thinking, oh, what happens next? Where are you going to go next after you're done with your master's degree, et cetera, et cetera. So the person jokingly brought down a map, said, close your eyes. I'm going to spin the map and you point.
Right.
So I said, okay, well, nobody's here, nothing to do. I opened my eyes and it was Madras.
Wow.
Right? I said, and at that moment I was saying, yes, that would be nice. That's my dream too, but oh well, not possible. And that friend inspired me. Why be so negative? At least check it out.
Right.
I said, okay. So that very night I was sort of Googling, and lo and behold, I found an announcement for this school, KM Music Conservatory, which was hadn't yet been opened by A.R. Rahman, right? But it was about to be. I found the name of somebody associated with the project. I sent an email and then didn't hear anything for months and months and months and months. And then one day I was coming out of the underground. I was coming out of the tube. I saw a missed call on my phone. I said, who is this? I dialed it back and it was Rahman.
Wow.
And he had a house in London. So he said, come over, let's meet. So I went there and we interacted for, half the day. And so then at the end, he invited me to come to Chennai. He said, come be a faculty member at this school and maybe some other things too.
Right.
So
amazing. What a story.
So that's what happened. I went and I became a faculty member there. And then since I was there, all of a sudden there were all these recordings for the films too.
And that's how you did Delhi 6, you did Gajni, you did Rahman.
Yep. And other ones too.
Right. What was it like working with Rahman? He hadn't still won the Oscar for Slumdog, I think.
He did just when I was there.
Just when you were there,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
That really did transform him again. I mean, he was always a national icon, but that really gave him, you know, a completely different level of fame. What was it
That's
like
true.
working with him then? He, of
Well,
course, remains untouched by it.
yes. Well, I mean, it was for me, you know, I was sort of airdropped into this right in the middle of all of that madness, swept up in that time, you know? And so everything was new for me, you know? And I really enjoyed it. I really loved working with the students. I really loved working with the students at his school because, you know, I found it very refreshing that they didn't have the same musical conditioning that I was accustomed to students having in the West.
In what
So,
sense?
in the sense that, let's say in the West, you can play something in a major key, and people automatically will have the idea that it's something, you know, happy, right? Or you play something in a minor key, and automatically people will say, yes, the emotion associated with this is sadness.
Right.
But here in India, you have so many ragas, right? That there isn't this automatic association of these emotions with these particular types of harmony, right? So actually, I realized that a lot of this stuff is, I thought somehow it was innate, but I realized that no, it's all conditioning, it's all learned. It all depends on what you're trained to understand from music from a young age. So it was very eye-opening in that respect, I have to say. You know, and very refreshing.
What was it like working with Rahman? Because he only wakes up at 2 o'clock at night.
Yes, so that meant that, you know, there's a lot of coffee and, you know, you know how things are. Things are never, it's not as if everything is recorded all at once. You hear all the instruments playing at once, but, you know, the singer comes one day, the violinist comes another day, the guitarist comes a third day. So you never really know what you're doing until you hear the whole thing together, you know? And so since there's a lot of waiting, I remember there being a lot of waiting. You'd be called, oh, there'll be a recording tonight.
Right.
Okay, so you go.
Yeah.
What time should I come? Come 8 o'clock.
Yeah.
You go and they say, go have your dinner.
Yeah.
You know, okay, so come back. You come back 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock.
Right.
And now, okay, something else is happening. No, there's 3 more people recording first.
Yeah.
So, you know, by 2 o'clock in the morning or something like that, then it finally happens. So there's a lot of waiting around and trying to keep yourself up because you normally are on a daytime schedule.
Yeah.
And also you're meeting a lot of interesting people who are also there for recordings.
I was about to say that. I mean, you're not alone. You probably have Amir Khan or, you know, Mani Ratnam sitting next to you. So it's pretty democratic.
Yeah, you have. I mean, maybe not, you know, Mani Ratnam or Amir Khan, but you have musicians anyway.
Yeah.
The musicians who are participating. So that was always very interesting, and not always musicians. People from who were there for other reasons, you know.
Right.
So that was quite something, and so that would happen every now and again. Anytime there's a big film, there'd be that whole thing, and the rest of the time you're teaching. Now, for me, it was also very interesting because as it happened, you know, the reason that I'm here is because I assume because I wrote a book called The Heartfulness Way,
Of
right?
course.
And it's a book about heartfulness meditation.
Right.
At that time, the world headquarters of this organization was also in Chennai.
Oh, okay. Not Hyderabad as it is now.
No, it was in Chennai. Daji also lived in Chennai at that time. And in fact, he and I lived in the same apartment block.
Oh, talk about coincidence.
So that's actually, I had met him some years earlier, but that's actually the first time I really had a chance to get to know him.
Okay.
Reason being that I was good friends with one of his sons who was living there with him, and we were around the same age. So I'd always end up at his apartment, and, you know, Daji would also be there because at this time, you know, now we have to say, I think for the benefit of your viewers, that Heartfulness Institute is an international organization. It's there in over 130 countries. And the, you know, say founder and global guide of this organization which teaches meditation,
Yeah.
is this person we're speaking of,
Right.
Daji.
Daji.
And Daji is also the co-author of, or maybe you can say the main author of the book, The Heartfulness Way,
Right.
right? At that time, back in 2008, he was not yet in that role. His
Okay.
predecessor was there in that role. He
Right.
had not even been declared the successor in this lineage of Raja Yoga masters.
So he was still a pharmacist from New Jersey.
He was a pharmacist from New York. I respected him a lot.
Right.
This isn't to say, I always would go to him first with any spiritual question or any issue of any kind, whether worldly or spiritual. I felt that he was somebody who could always be there. In any case, so I got to know him under those circumstances through his son. And as a consequence, I spent a lot of time there and felt very comfortable. Perhaps that's why he asked me to join him writing The Heartfulness Way so many years later.
Right. So such a series of remarkable coincidences brought you to where you are now, which is primarily a heartfulness trainer, or do you consider yourself a musician, or what? How do you see yourself now?
I don't know anymore. Help. I mean, I'm not primarily playing music anymore.
Right.
Because time constraints, because being involved in this, writing a book takes time.
Yeah.
And then there was like an 80-city book tour that came afterwards, and then other things. So, sort of life just took a shift, I would say.
Right.
Life just took a shift. So that's not, so I'm, I don't know what to say to this question.
But what really does heartfulness teach you, and why do you think it's so important right now? Because, we know what the world is facing. We know what we individually are facing. We've just seen a very public suicide by one of our more beloved younger actors, and it's sort of shaken up quite a few people.
I'm sure.
So at this point in history, why do you see heartfulness as a way out?
Well, in a very fundamental way, right? There's a lot going on in the world that we have no control over.
Right.
And certainly there's nothing over which we have complete control.
Right.
Our circumstances, etc., especially the people with whom we're connected, right? That's why we have so much friction with others, family members. Right? And at a certain point, we have to come to the realization that is the way that I feel and are my thoughts going to be 100% dependent upon the circumstances, right? Which I can't control.
Yeah.
And if so, then my quality of life is going to suffer a lot.
Yeah.
So then I have to realize that my quality of life has to be in some way independent of the external circumstances. Of course, it will always be connected. For instance, somebody will betray you, God forbid, right? Somebody betrays you. Everybody's going to be affected by that.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter who you are, right? If you're a master, you'll still be affected by that.
Right.
But the question now is how easily can you forgive? How easily can you let these things go?
Right.
Are you going to be somebody who can just sort of like water off of a duck's back?
Yeah.
Or are you going to carry this grudge and this heaviness and anger to your grave with you, right? Those are two extremes. Most of us fall somewhere in the middle of the spectrum.
Yeah.
Right? Now, so at a certain point, I think we have to decide, we have to ask ourselves, is it possible to be happy? Is it possible to be at peace? In spite of the fact that all of these things are happening externally that I can't control. And then we have to realize that if it is possible, that means I'm going to have to learn this art of managing my thoughts and managing my feelings, right? I'm going to have to learn to do something about my inner environment, not just my external environment. So that leads us, very clearly that leads us to some sort of meditative practice, because in meditation, you learn to regulate your mind and your emotions, right? Now, when you're able to do that, when you have some success with this, there are many more doors that open to you, many more opportunities then follow. Once you've tasted, I would say, peace and happiness, very, very low-hanging fruit, at least in heartfulness, very low-hanging fruit, right? for so many people, maybe they seem unattainable.
Yeah.
I would say try this for 3 months' time, and you'll see that it's not unattainable. You'll see that you very quickly are in a state of experiencing joy and experiencing peace. But now something new comes. If I might be permitted just to continue for one moment.
Sure.
Something new now comes, because when you're no longer being buffeted by the pushes and pulls of the world surrounding you, now you're in a state of balance.
Right.
This state of balance has been extolled so highly in the Gita, where
Yeah.
Lord Krishna speaks about sthit pragya, right? That is not a stage that you attain one day. That's just a way of living, right? The sthit pragya, it's a way of living. So when you're able to manage yourself and separate yourself from the externals, then automatically you're in that state of pragya, that state of balance. Then what happens is you become very clear mentally. You're no longer being influenced by so many things. That is what they call, Viveka,
Right.
right? So all of a sudden you get this clear discrimination. That tells me what is important and what is something I should pursue versus something that I should avoid. Right? The heart tells you this, because in a very clear way, the heart will tell you, it'll give you a negative feeling or a feeling of heaviness when there's something you should avoid.
Right.
It'll just say no,
Right.
right? Whereas it'll give you a sense of peace if there's something that you should pursue,
Right.
right? So very naturally, what proceeds from this viveka is a sense of renunciation or vairagya.
Right.
Right? Renunciation isn't about running away to the Himalayas.
Yeah.
It's about very clearly discriminating what serves your purpose and what is your purpose anyway. It also tells you that. It also tells you, what is the goal of my life? What is
Right.
worthwhile, what isn't, right? So
Right.
then you're able to renounce all those things which are not worthwhile to the ultimate goal of life, which this yoga is pointing you towards. And so like this, it propels you along your way, where much greater opportunities await at every step. So you're starting off with a very basic thing. I just want to be happy. I just want some relief in life. And then it takes you to great heights.
Now, when we talk about balance, that really is what yoga is all about. It's not just a physical exercise. It's about the balance between the mind, body, soul. But how exactly do you achieve it? In your case, you suggest listening to the heart. But how do you start listening to the heart? How do you know what the heart is telling you? And how do you know what your mind is telling you?
See, it's like to tell somebody to listen to the heart.
Yeah.
It's like telling a tree how to grow.
Right.
You know, you don't need to do that. Instead, what you do is you provide that tree with the necessary conditions for growth.
Right.
Right? What does it need? Some sunlight. It needs some water.
Right.
It needs some basic care. And throughout its life, whether it's a sapling or it's a mighty tree,
Right.
you know, it still needs those same basic conditions
Right.
for it to thrive. Right? Same way, you can't explain to somebody. You can't explain to somebody, this is how you listen to your heart.
Yeah.
You can explain it to them, but it'll go in one ear and out the other.
Right.
But if you can teach that person to meditate and some other practices which automatically attune them to the heart, then they'll start listening to it on their own, right? Without even necessarily realizing that, oh, I'm following my heart today. It won't come as a conscious thought like that. You'll just do it because you'll feel bad not doing it. Do you know what I mean? So, but I'll also say, to try to answer your question, that the heart communicates through feelings. The mind can, if you're very aware and if you can analyze the cause of these feelings, your heart, and come to some conclusion. But often, I think the more practice you gain in this field, the more automatic it becomes, where you don't have to search for the meaning of this heaviness that you're now experiencing, let's say. I was like, oh, what is it my heart telling me that I'm doing wrong, that I should avoid? It's just, you just simply know it. So the heart communicates through feeling, feeling and inspiration. Again, you see in the Gita where Lord Krishna says something to the effect of, I am in the heart of all created things, right? So now that means that consciousness, now you say that I like the way you're describing the TIFFIN talks, right?
Yeah.
It's food for the entire being,
Yeah.
right? Right. So now consciousness, when you meditate on the heart, consciousness now comes into contact
Right.
with that presence within, and it illuminates your consciousness. That means that you get inspired, right? So you become very much guided in life, I should say.
Is there a particular kind of meditation which is unusual to heartfulness, which is different from others?
Well, there are unique aspects to this practice, surely. I would say the most unique thing is not meditation itself, but something we call pranahuti, or yogic transmission.
Right.
That is what we generally experience when we go to a heartfulness trainer,
Right.
right? And that person has been prepared to be able to transmit to you.
Right.
Now, here I just want to pause and take a diversion to mention, now that I've used this word trainer, you should not think that now it involves some sort of monetary transaction, because it does not.
Yeah.
Everything here, it must be said, is freely shared, because the premise here is that spirituality cannot be sold.
Right.
Right? And this is not a market. So anyway, that being said, yogic transmission is something that we experience when we meditate along with a person who's been prepared to be able to impart that transmission. And what is it anyway? Well, I can say it like this, I think. Many people believe in many things. Many people believe in God. They believe in gods, plural. They believe in all sorts of things, right? I think belief without the backing of any kind of experience, there will always be some doubt lingering in the background. You know, there'll always be some doubt. Unless you've truly experienced it for yourself, you won't be 100%. See, people often in various religions, they demand faith first, right? They say, first you believe.
Yeah.
This is difficult to do because this does not resonate with our regular experience in worldly life.
Yeah.
When you meet somebody for the first time, would you believe in them first before you let them hold on to your valuables?
Yeah.
No, never. It would be the acme of foolishness, right? So you learn that somebody's trustworthy. You learn that they're a friend.
Right.
And based on your experience of that person, you now say, aha, I believe in you. I have faith in you. So heartfulness says that the same holds true in our relationship with the divine.
Right.
We have to have some experience. Only then can faith come, true faith.
But
Right.
you need that trainer to understand that. Can you not
Yes.
by self-study?
I'm giving you, I'm trying to give so many pieces of background information. So given that this experience is so important, though people believe in God, a majority of people, I think will say, I've never experienced that presence.
Right.
I believe in that presence, but do I experience, if it's supposed to be omnipresent, do I experience it constantly? Do I experience it everywhere? No, the answer is no. Let's compare that to something else that surrounds us, which we do not experience. Oxygen, right? We're there. The air is all around us. Do we remember that it's all around us?
Yeah.
In the hot summer day, when someone turns on the ceiling fan, then we remember it, right? Now this current of air is set in motion and we're refreshed by it, right? Similarly, this transmission, God is everywhere, but you're not aware of it.
Right.
But when somebody is able to trigger this flow of divine currents toward you, much like the ceiling fan does, then you do experience it. And then you say, aha, there is something. I've felt it. And this is something which we feel with the heart again. The heart is the organ of feeling.
It cannot come through self-study.
Well, I don't know about study, because that's too intellectual. This is about feeling, right? So I can tell you, you don't have to believe me, because the best thing is just try it yourself. Meditate alone on your own, and however you like to meditate.
Right.
Okay? You can learn any kind of meditation anywhere.
Right.
And try it. See what its effect is. Be
Right.
scientific, right? Be scientific. You can then learn what this method is. I can even tell you today what this method is, and do that by itself.
Tell
See
us.
what the effect is. Huh?
Tell us.
Yeah, I will.
Yeah.
And finally, find a way that you can get somebody to transmit to you.
Right.
And meditate with that. And then see if there's any difference
Make a
there. If there's no difference, then you can discount everything I'm saying. But
Right.
see for yourself is the idea. That's the main thing. Experience for yourself, come to your own conclusion about it.
Right.
Right? And see for yourself if it's possible to come to that state alone.
Right.
Right? And it may be possible, but some things take a long time too. And sometimes we can accelerate things, which if nature takes its course, you know, like the continents moving,
Yeah.
you know, it can take a very long time. Tradition says in yoga, tradition has people meditating, what myths, they
Yeah.
say this person meditated for 50,000 years, that person
Exactly.
meditated.
Yeah.
So you can go that that route if you prefer.
Right. But what really does this technique boil down to? The prana? What
mean-
what really is it?
And say it's been defined very nicely as divine energy for the utilization, the utilization of divine energy for the transformation of a human being.
Right.
That's its definition.
Yeah.
I would even say that doesn't go far enough, because here I'm reminded of some of the, the beautiful poetry of Kabir,
Yeah.
right? And he uses these paradoxical statements.
Yes.
He talks about rain coming from a cloudless sky.
Right.
He talks about, like the violin, right? He talks about the sound of an unstruck string. That means a string that hasn't even been plucked, that hasn't been bowed. What
Right.
kind of sound is that?
Yeah.
Right? So he said, what on the earth is he talking about?
Yeah.
He's talking about something. So what is it? So when we talk about energy, I said transmission is divine energy. Well, when we think of energy, this is part of the created world. Energy is part of the material manifestation, right? That's how we think of energy. This is not, right? This is like Kabir's type of sound. This energy is like Kabir's sound, the sound of an unstruck string. This is what Kabir is talking about. It is the sound of the unmanifest. This is the energy of the unmanifest.
Right.
Right? And that alone can take you yourself to the state of being unmanifested,
Right.
which is, of course, the goal of yoga.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly. And that's what we forget. We tend to look at yoga as a sort of form of physical exercise now, and we don't associate it with a deep spiritual awakening, which it really is.
Yes.
Why has that happened in the country of its origin, of all places,
Well,
which ought to know better?
I don't know why it's happened, but I think that, what we're trying to do is highlight the fact that that yoga is much more than that.
Yeah.
Right. And I think, I'll say that such conviction will come through experience.
Yeah.
Yoga, of course, I think I'm not a scholar, but I think yoga used to be classified under various headings.
Yeah.
Right. Hatha yoga is asanas.
Yeah.
Right. And then heartfulness is Raj Yoga.
Raj Yoga.
Right. And that's usually what we think of as Patanjali's system, his Ashtanga Yoga.
Yeah.
Right. And he lists 8 steps
Yeah.
there, one of which is asana.
Right.
Right. But then when he describes the meaning of asana, it becomes clear that he's not referring to asana in the same sense as modern day hatha yogis.
Right.
Because he makes one statement. He says, your asana, in English at least, he says your posture should be that which is steady and comfortable.
Right.
Beyond that, he says nothing.
Yeah.
That's all he says. He basically means that sit in a comfortable, steady position so that you can meditate.
Yeah.
Right. So that's the main purpose there.
And it doesn't talk about breathing at all.
He talks about pranayama.
Right.
Right. But that itself, the word itself, if you look to it at its roots, etymological roots, that means expanding prana.
Right.
right? It doesn't per se have anything to do with breathing.
Right.
Breathing is a method that people have invented in order to expand that prana. But if it can be expanded via other means, then you'll still be fulfilling this obligation of pranayama, even without a breathing technique. I have nothing against breathing techniques. I'm not saying that. It just doesn't happen to be part of heartfulness.
Right.
And the reason is that the yogic transmission, which I was just describing, it fulfills that. Whatever it is that pranayama achieves, yogic transmission also achieves, but achieves more at the same time, I would say.
So, did you also come through this through a process of trial and error?
Of course.
Did you try many different kinds of
Yes.
yoga before you settled on this?
Not only yoga, but other things too.
Right.
Other kinds of meditation, Buddhist meditations as well. I read a lot too. I had a more intellectual bent
Right.
at that time. And I would say that, I was very impressed by philosophy too. So if something was very convincing philosophically, I would like it. And I was also intrigued, at that time, I liked the Zen approach because they have this approach where it sort of kills your mind to a certain extent. So that was very attractive to me too. I would say that out of all the things that I tried, I was more impressed by what it promised and the philosophy built up around it than I was by the actual experience of practice.
Right.
And so that was always disappointing to me. That was disappointing, but not discouraging.
Right.
And the reason it wasn't discouraging is because as a violinist, I understood that good things come in time.
Right.
The violin, it is not like a keyboard instrument where it'll be in tune the moment you play. As long as the piano's in tune, it'll be in tune.
Right.
And the sound will be basically good.
Yeah.
Whereas the violin will be completely out of tune.
Yeah.
And the sound will be just squawks and scratches and screeches.
Yeah.
Right? So you have to be disciplined, you have to be patient, right? You have to work hard.
Right.
This I knew. And so I thought, well, if the meditation I'm doing is not creating the effect that I'm seeking,
Right.
then it's a matter of diligence and it's a matter of time. And one day I'll get there. Right?
How important is sleep to all this, Joshua? We find that sleeplessness is one of the biggest problems actually of modern life. How important is sleep to this?
Well, I can share that when I sleep better and when I sleep more, then my life is better. I'm not as dull, My intelligence has another dimension to it.
Right.
Yeah, the science on sleep is well established.
Yeah.
And everyone everyone understands now that sleep is important.
Yeah.
Of course, meditation also produces a freshness in another way that sleep cannot accomplish.
Right.
Too. Even if I sleep 8 hours, but I don't meditate, I would almost rather that I'd slept 6 hours, but meditated.
Right.
In terms of my freshness.
Right. So if I were to ask you, Joshua, because we're treating you like a yoga guru today, what are the 4 or 5 things that we need to do in our daily lives to be connected to our hearts, to be connected to our emotions?
Well, we have to try.
Right.
We have to try to connect. Now, when I say connect to the heart, first of all, I'm not implying that we should now become overly emotional.
Right.
Either. That's reactivity.
Right.
Emotion is always reactivity. You're reacting to something in particular. Your thought is positive or negative, and that positivity or negativity associated with that thought is nothing but emotion.
Right.
Right? So that is the opposite of balance, in fact. Right? That's the opposite of being balanced when you're constantly reacting, positive and negative, positive and negative. Right? So it isn't about that. So instead, I would say that the thing we have to do is we have to connect to the heart. I connect to the heart. I'm showing you sort of right now.
Yeah.
You close your eyes, you put your attention there, reestablish that connection. But the thing is that I'm saying you reestablish because you have to establish in the first place in order to reestablish afterwards. And my feeling, my experience says that this is what we accomplish through the active daily, regular meditation practice. We establish that contact where this becomes our guide, like that famous symbol of Arjuna in the chariot, where he is the passenger and the Lord is the driver. In the same way, this becomes the driver. And the presence that's within this organ becomes the driver, and I become the passenger. But for that to happen, I have to become aware of it. I have to feel it. I have to experience that, right? So that's one thing. That's the primary thing. Secondary, and that we do that through meditation. And we keep reconnecting throughout the day. In case we lose it, we can find that again.
Right.
And eventually it becomes constant. It becomes 24 hours. Second thing, to reduce, you can have these smoky fires, right? It's not a good fire, not an efficient fire, one that burns with a lot of smoke.
Right.
That's like emotion and feeling, is like smoke and fire. True feeling is like fire, but emotion is like smoke.
Right.
So that becomes a whole sort of layer that you have to be able to pierce through to access the true voice of the heart.
Right.
We can remove the effects of so much built up emotion. We've all emerged from the battlefield of life with so many scars, I think, and those things remain with us, even if you don't feel them anymore. Suppose, you have a boyfriend or a girlfriend when you're in college and you break up, or that person dumps you, right? Now, you may not be affected by that now, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years later, but you were affected then. And at that time, that emotion impacted what became your worldview now that you still carry, right? So we have to be able to remove the burden of that old emotion, emotional memory, residual emotion from us. Heartfulness, one of the unique facets of heartfulness is something which we call cleaning, by which we remove this emotional residue from our systems and
What's
feel. We call it the cleaning.
Cleaning, okay.
Cleaning, yeah, it's simple. Yeah. Simply called cleaning because what we're cleaning is this emotional residue.
Right.
And if we're going to use yogic language, we would say we're removing samskaras.
Right.
It's the same thing. Samskaras are emotional memory.
Right.
So by removing that excess emotion from the past, number one, we feel much lighter. We remove the scar. But the biggest thing that happens is that it frees us so much in the present. Because let's say you knew somebody who looked like me 10 years ago, right? And this person was a mean guy, right? Now you meet me for the first time.
Right.
Are you going to like me the first time you see me?
Yeah.
You're not going to like me. Nothing I've done to you is just because I look like somebody who from the past. And now that emotion comes up and you see that old person when you see my face.
Right.
Right? So when we're doing that, can we actually perceive the reality in the present moment? We can't.
Right.
What we're seeing in the present is only the past.
Right.
The result of conditioning of the past.
Right.
That is the result of these samskaras, this excess emotion from the past. So every night in this heartfulness practice, we close our eyes, we sit and we perform this practice by which we can remove all this accumulation on a daily basis. And you know that it's real not because you have to believe in it again, but you know it because you feel the lightness that dawns at the end of this session. You'll just feel it may be the end of the day, right? But all of a sudden you feel lighter than you felt at the beginning of the day, fresher. So that's a very important thing, I would say. And that is absolutely unique because you don't find this concept. I'm not aware of it anywhere, actually.
And then sleep comes easily.
I wouldn't, yeah, I would say it comes easily, but in fact, I would not do this cleaning right before sleep because
Because
you're so invigorated.
exactly, you feel very fresh, right?
Yeah, you won't sleep. Best time to do is 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, like that.
And how long do you have to do it?
Oh, 15 to 30 minutes.
Right. So you could let your past flash before your eyes and you could just throw it out little by little.
Yes. And you don't even need to let it pass before your eyes. You don't even need to be aware of what it is.
Yeah,
Just a general thing. Everything is going.
right. It sounds so wonderful. It
This
sounds
is
refreshing.
this is why I am such a proponent of it. I
Yeah,
think it's miraculous.
right. And it seems so simple.
Yeah.
And does this also involve, do you also do a lot of physical exercise along with this? Or
It's
is it
not well, it's not part of this. Of course, physical exercise is necessary for physical health.
right?
But heartfulness is for the health of one's consciousness, one's emotions, one's attitude, and one's spiritual life,
Right.
one's spiritual destiny, right? I also, especially pre-lockdown, used to do exercise. I
Yeah.
have to confess that these days, not much is happening. So,
So do you do this every day
yeah,
without fail?
without fail.
Okay, great.
Well, I mean, if I miss it, then of course I regret it.
Right.
Yeah.
So is this just one of the things that heartfulness teaches you? Of course, there are other aspects to it.
This is the thing again, like there is so much depth,
Yeah,
but not everything can be taught.
right.
A. Not like you would teach somebody in a classroom, a university professor, right? And B, here the idea is that you're learning from within, nothing is being imposed on you from the outside, right? So the thing that we teach primarily is a very simple practice. As a result of that simple practice, you experience the depth, you experience the various nuances, right? But that's not because you're being told about them.
Right.
That's because you're being taught to do something which will produce that effect in you.
Right.
Of course, there's also lots of literature you can read.
We have a question from Pratik Chaudhary, which is, do religious beliefs help or disrupt meditation? Interesting, I think.
I think that this is an interesting question, actually.
Yeah. Tough one as well.
Yeah. Well, I think that you do not. I've been talking about how experience is somehow greater than belief, right?
Right.
Fine. That does not mean that anyone is requesting you to please abandon your religious beliefs or any other kind of beliefs.
Right.
Everything has to be done naturally.
Right.
This is the key thing.
Right.
And otherwise it's inauthentic.
Right.
Right? You can't just come along, and this isn't something where you change, I've come across paths where people change their dress and people change their name, but I don't find any inner change.
Yeah.
Right? That's external change.
Right.
Right? Here we say the inner change is the real change, and external change comes as a result of that. So therefore, if you have an experience, your beliefs will change accordingly based on your experience. But you do not need to stop whatever worship you're doing now and do anything else instead. I view this for people who are very comfortable with what they're doing already, who are very comfortable with their beliefs.
Right.
I view this as a sort of like vitamin supplement. You do this and it'll help you experience the truth behind your beliefs.
Right. Yeah. Great, Joshua. I think it's been quite a learning experience. Thank you so very much for your time. We'll keep the violin for another time. I won't let you forget that.
Okay.
But thank you very much, Pawan.
You too.
Would you like to close the session?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much, Joshua. Thank you so much, Kaveree, ma'am. I believe what we discussed today in the last 40 minutes is so much more relevant in today's time. Right
Yeah.
now, I mean, with the kind of world disorder which we are seeing, and I would say a tectonic shift in how we're going to live,
Exactly.
literally in the present and the future. Something which talks about mind, body, spirit, and how to harness those things together is going to do a world of good to our viewers. Thank you so much for your valuable time, Joshua, and thank you everybody who joined us today on Tiffin Talks. Please
Thank
catch
you.
us live on Facebook, and we'll be putting this video by today evening or tomorrow morning on YouTube as well. Follow us there. Thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you, Joshua. Thank you, Pawan.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
ma'am. Thank you.
Bye.